Hello, Uganda. Good evening, and welcome to this edition of the Hot Seat on 933 KFM. I welcome you, our listeners across this beautiful land, the Pearl of Africa. My name is Patrick Kamara. Tonight, we put our spotlight on education. Why? Because the government is planning to scrap or cut off points in secondary school in admissions. And let me explain this. Because we've woken up to headlines saying the new draft National Curriculum Assessment and Placement Policy developed by government says schools will be required to admit a balanced mix of learners across all performance levels rather than selecting only the top performers. For example, under the current system, top performing schools admit only the highest achievers. Typically those with aggregate 4 or 5 in primary living examinations for senior 1, or maximum aggregate 10 in Uganda Certificate of Examination for senior 5 entry. And so students with the lower aggregates, even if they have passed, are often denied places in these schools. That has been the situation. And now government is saying all of them have passed. Even if you are second grade or third grade, you should go in what we think the elite is an elite school in Uganda. How will that work? So my guest this evening will be trying to help us understand this issue, and probably the intent of government is an educationist himself. And let me try to introduce him. I have Mr. Patrick Kaboyo, who is the National Secretary of the Federation of Non-State Education Institutions and Executive Director, Education Advocacy Network. Mr. Kaboyo, thank you so much for joining us. Good evening, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Kamara. Good evening, and good evening to our dear listeners and viewers out there. I'm happy to be here to share this.
For many years, the parents, or even when we are back in school as students ourselves, you'd be working so hard to fit into the system so that you can score so high, and then you go into the elite schools of Uganda. Now, government wants to scrap this cut-off points in secondary school during admissions. First of all, in general terms, what do you make of this proposition?
Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you so much for prioritizing matters education. First is to say that I think government is moving faster than the public in the area of reform. And when I talk about moving faster, it brings me back to the catchphrase or the slogan for Education 2030 of the Sustainable Development Goal, specifically Goal 4, which is quality education. The catchphrase is leaving no one behind. And leaving no one behind, we are looking at the 3 key stakeholders in this. The first is the learner. The second is the parent. The third is the teacher. But all those 3 stakeholders are navigated in that boat we are sailing in, called government. Mm-hmm. But as we sail on the waters, we have to understand whether the waters are murky or the sailing is calm. But I want to tell you that the level at which the reform is being driven leaves a lot of members in the public without requisite information, without clear trajectory, without the clear vision of what is happening, and this will have some dire ramification, because at a certain point, people will start asking how this, why this, when this. And to justify what I have said is to share with the people who are listening is that as we speak on the curriculum, placement, and assessment policy, you should know that the lower secondary school curriculum is in the second year of its assessment and implementation of the competence-based curriculum. And with that brings in a new dimension of the continuous assessment and the summative assessment. Well, the continuous assessment is presenting a contribution in terms of percentage to the overall assessment,
which is 20%.
20%. The parents, including a few that are elites, do not comprehend the report that is given to them because of either not following up, not having
but it's still a new program, so it's still new.
It's still new.
Even the teachers are still learning.
Yes.
The parents are yet to understand it, so eventually perhaps everybody will grasp it.
Yes, so the role of a radio like this is to really have shows like this, but also for us in advocacy is to keep speaking and advising where government should pick. Now, that one is being implemented as a reform ongoing. But as it takes place, as we speak now, experts are seated somewhere looking at the review of the primary school curriculum for Uganda, which should also be competence-based.
So there's a possibility, there's a plan to also to review that.
I'm telling you that the reform is on and the reform is real. But for this reform to be fully understood and to have the benefit that it is delivering is to ensure that the public is brought on board to understand.
But primarily got into thematic teaching, which is about 10, 15 years back?
True.
Which is still new.
It is government.
It is fairly new.
It's not new. The UNESCO instrument, in all the education that we deliver globally, the engine or the custodian of education is UNESCO. So UNESCO Bureau for Education recommends that a curriculum worth its name should change after 5 years. So ours, since it was introduced as thematic curriculum, it has gone, I think, over 15 years. So the review for this very thematic curriculum is within time.
And before we went to thematic, it had been on for almost 60 years.
Exactly, and of course, up to date, as we speak, we still have curricula that is largely influenced by the colonial education mentality, that sometimes those we think should be taught are not indigenous, are not within us.
Okay, I want to go also in this discussion to go into the curriculum, of course the primary, the one that is being proposed, but also we shall look into the thematic curriculum, how it changed teaching in primary school. But I want your views on the government proposition of admission in secondary, because look, very many bright students or pupils who make it in some of these schools in Karenga, in Bundubujo, in Kisoro, in Kenjojo, may not be able to go to the SMAC and Budro and Gayas of this country just because they missed 1 or 2 points, and they could even be smarter than the Kampala parents.
I think for me, this proposal has been long overdue. It should have come yesterday. Reason being that the selection committee that there is in the Ministry of Education and Sports sometimes does not give a 360 approach to that selection. And when we are talking about education, it's the only provision that can equalize the disadvantaged with the advantaged, with the privileged and the one that is not privileged, with the intelligent boy or girl deep far that has performed well and can be placed in the school of their choice. But you know for sure that if you visited, let's say as we speak now, if any doctor or professor at Makere listening to us, if you asked him in the intake of the last 5 years in the faculties, let's say those students, medicine, pharmacy, engineering, law, architecture, those students who have enrolled there, I want to tell you, are from specific schools that have tools, that have resources, that have all it takes for them to be able to enroll on those courses on government sponsorship. But when we want to make this selection fair, there have to be fundamental issues that we have to discuss.
And when you look at it at the admission level of university, you're also missing it. We're talking about a child who has had a fair advantage from kindergarten. You've been to the best of the best in Kampala, the best of the best in Wakiso and Mukono, and probably also your parents are also among the elite, those who are able to pay. So in other words, those who have, a lot is added onto them, and those who don't have, biblically, even the little they have is taken away.
I think for me, again, is to, you've quoted the Bible, I think is to quote again Matthew 7:7, where there is ASK. You ask, seek, and knock. So as actors in the sector, is to keep knocking on the doors of government, to seek involvement of key stakeholders in the reform discourse, but also to seek and knock and ask that for the reforms to be meaningful, for a child in Kisoro, for example, for a child in Karenga, for a child in Kapelabyong, to be able to study at St. Mary's College, Kisubi or Gayaza, should be supported and guaranteed by their brain, because it is the brain that is the human capital. But for these to be able to have that, it means that we have to look at the institutional, legal, and policy framework that informs the selection as a desire we want to implement. Why institutional, legal, and policy framework? One, that primary education is a decentralized function, is delivered at local government, cities, and municipalities. That secondary education is both that there are teachers in the districts, but they are recruited at the center. And those are the very teachers who receive learners from the lower levels. But again, when we come to this level of basic education, we have a law, which is the Pre-Primary, Primary, and Post-Primary Act of 2008, which is also old, and I understand processes for its review are on, but again, the public is not fully informed that these are the tenets that are being followed for the review to inform placement. Then, at the higher education, which is another tier, is the Universities and Other Tertiary Institutions Act, which, of course, has the tenet of having admission of men and women now entering higher education under the Public Universities Joint Admission Board. So if we have the Pujab admitting at that level, we have selection being done at these levels. Now my concern is that if we are to harmonize the reform and have a clear identification and alignment of the human capital we need, it is good that this starts right from preschool, that a child who should be assisted to be placed properly should start right from where the cycle starts of education. So if we fix it right at preschool, they will enter primary school when they are very well sorted and selected, and also at secondary school when they are adequately catered for, without discrimination, without favor, without leaving others behind. So if we sort this and we mean what we are saying, is the best thing that is going to bring the entire country where we used to be. Before we started school, that's what we were told by our parents.
All right. Patrick Kaboyo, National Secretary of the Education of the Federation of Non-State Education Institutions and Executive Director, Education Advocacy Network. We're going to take a break, and the hot seat will be right back. Welcome back to 933 KFM, and this is the hot seat. My name is Patrick Kamara, and tonight we are trying to shed a light into matters of education, and my guest is the Secretary of the Federation of Non-State Education Institutions and Executive Director, Education Advocacy Network, Mr. Patrick Kaboyo. And you said this proposal for admissions for secondary school should have come even earlier.
True.
But I'm thinking it's going to be very difficult, I suppose, for the selection committees to be able to pick those on the aggregate 4 and those on the aggregate with second grade also to go in the same elite school. For example, you want to take your children to Budo so that the one who has scored 4 can at the same time also be with the one with the second grade from Kavira Maido, or let me use even my own district, from Kenyojo, to be in the same place. I mean, how can the selection committee be able to pull off that? I know they're still working on it, but won't that be a big issue?
Thank you so much, Patrick. The listeners should know that the reform, the education reform, is not just a Ugandan thing. It is a global phenomenon. Because in the past, we used to have the Millennium Development Goals, which closed, and we adopted the Sustainable Development Goals, and we are remaining with about 5 years to close that. The discussion at the global level for transformative education and what should be done have been happening in France, New York, but all this also creates the avenue for the African Union, where they also have the continental education strategy for Africa, which goes up to 2063, but they classified it and phased it that I think by 2025, which is this year, we should have reached at a certain level. And what the countries in the East African region, for instance, have picked first is the competence-based curriculum. But as we pick the competence-based curriculum, it's largely informing the reform. And when you ask how will those doing this cater for those students you have mentioned in those districts, here is to be honest with ourselves and accept that times are changing, that when we were in school, for instance, I never heard of artificial intelligence. When I was in school, it was the time of typewriters, and computers were not so popular. During that time, there was the frequency modulation, FM, that's starting to come up. But as we speak now, things are changing, and we have to fit within.
Right now, people are listening to you online. They're listening to you on their phones.
Exactly.
They're watching you.
Some have never seen me.
Yeah.
But in all this, what we need to see is the value system of the education that is being delivered. For instance, you'll ask someone, what are the indicators of a good school? Somebody will tell you a very high-rised, well-painted swimming pool. That's not what makes a school. What makes a school are the software deliverables in this school that has to do with the molding of the learners that are in. But again, when we discuss the curriculum, assessment, and placement policy, we need to discuss issues of the heart, issues of values. How should they be assessed? Because it serves no purpose for you to get a student with a first-class degree from a university, but the actions of this person denote that he or she has no education or has no value system but has gone through education. So if we mean that we need to place this, then there has to be a synergy. For instance, the Directorate for Ethics and Integrity in the Office of the President should work closely with the Ministry of Education and Sports in the curriculum development to emphasize the value system we need in these learners in schools, because we already have the national ethical values. But when you look at what is on paper and the practice, there is departure. So for us to harmonize, then, we have to embed those value tenets in the assessment.
So teaching values, isn't it problematic? Teaching somebody to have empathy, teaching somebody to have integrity, teaching somebody to, you know, the respect for elders and stuff like that. I'm trying to think, how do you, because some of these things you're supposed to be ingrained in a child probably where they're raised in their homes.
In fact, it is an ecosystem, because theories like Yuri Bonfrena has it that for a child to learn, they have to be levels from home to school to society to workplace, where he places at exo, meso, meta, up to that level, so that we don't think as parents that the school will be the one to teach your child matters of the heart. And at this time, as a country, we should recognize the role played by mothers. I can speak on my side, but you'll find largely issues of the heart, of nurturing, of teaching these boys and girls in our homes are largely delivered by the mothers. So when these learners come to schools and they are well mentored and modeled, and they find a system that can deliver the best curriculum and can place them well, learners in a particular stream or class will be able to identify a badly behaved learner who has no values, and they will be able to teach or change that person positively. And this is the same that should guide in the actions that we want to promote in this curriculum assessment and placement policy. But the overarching macro policy framework is the report of the Education Policy Review Commission.
So in this placement policy that the government is proposing, how will it work largely that we have education system in private hands?
Of course, even when you read the National Development Plan 4, including the previous National Development Plan 3, the private sector has a role to play in the delivery of these services that the government is delivering as a facilitator, but also as a collaborator. And in terms of how this can be done, it is a matter of regulation, it's a matter of discussion, it's a matter of understanding, because there is no policy that pops like a mushroom. If you grew up from the village, you'd wake up in the morning, as you teach cows to graze, you find about 6 mushrooms have sprung. Policy should not spring from the ground, should be put to table, should be discussed, should be turned upside down, should be understood, should be validated, and those that it affects will appreciate, because they get accountable that they participated in the process.
Mr. Patrick Aboyo, Director, Education Advocacy Network. We're going to take a break, and the Hot Seat will be right back. Welcome back to 933 KFM, and this is the Hot Seat. My name is Patrick Amar. My guest this evening is the Secretary of the Federation of Non-State Education Institutions and Executive Director, Education Advocacy Network, Mr. Patrick Aboyo. I want to look into the current curriculum for secondary to see how it's been working, because everybody was happy to see that we have gone into the competence-based kind of curriculum, and of course the parents were also trying to do catch-up. Sometimes they wouldn't, and some of them, most of us don't even understand it, but probably we shall with time. But my biggest problem is the 20% marks we have to give, that is continuous assessment at the school level, which is going to be added to what one scores at UNAIB. Considering that education is in private hands in some cases, and people are into competition, there are some commercial interest in that, how are we sure that this 20% will actually be the true representation of the child's performance or ability from senior 1 to 4?
Thank you, Mr. Kamara. At the risk of asking your question, you started by saying parents were happy. I know you are a parent.
Yes.
Are you happy with the curriculum?
Yeah, because I said it's good, because when you're looking at the competence of a child is much more than just a theoretical cramming stuff.
Exactly. Thank you so much. I'm so happy because my own daughter, Komuntale, now can show that my tuition or my school fees has yielded. That when she returned from school in the previous term, she now supplies, she bakes and supplies our community at church. She has products that she's selling, and you already see an entrepreneur in making. But that said is part of the project work they are doing. But what you have asked mostly is on 3 key issues. One, on the 20% assessment, which points to teacher integrity. You have talked about the unhealthy competition, which talks about the dual mode of delivery that we have by both public and non-government or private. And the last, you have interrogated the efficacy of the entire curriculum. To start with, this country has received the best dosage or the best strategy, and I want to applaud the Minister for Education and Sports for spearheading the reform to have the national teacher policy in place. That national teacher policy has tenets of the teacher incentive framework, of the teacher professional continuous development of teachers, which is training. It has also all that can address the mischief and the deficits that this teacher will have come with from the training. So that teacher integrity is put to rest, and the marks are credible, reliable, and not questioned by any. But of course, the custodian of these marks that are continuously got is the Uganda National Examinations Board, whose work is respected in this country. So I can say, if the individuals responsible for implementing the national teacher policy holistically, 360, without picking what interests them to their advantage, and if they are listening to me, that it should be implemented to the latter, so that the issue of public trust and having the teacher deliver the right marks to authority is sorted. In terms of the unhealthy competition, right now I'm aware that there is a discussion on the provision of private education services as a matter of policy. There's a policy for provision of private education in Uganda ongoing. We participated in the discussion of that policy in Kololo SS, and we presented our views. So the unhealthy competition is unwanted because the reform is also showing us as actors in the private sector that gone are the days when we are going to rely entirely on how many falls, how many aggregates you have posted, but it should be competence-based.
But as the Secretary of the Federation of Non-State Education Institutions, isn't this new curriculum moving forward going to eat into your kind of profit margins?
In fact, it is the other way, because the new curriculum is delivered best when you have fewer learners in the classrooms, because it is learner-centered. It is competence-based. So it cannot be delivered when there are crowds, when the classroom is like a whole bus. So it gives...
The crowds are good for business. At the end of the day, for non-education institutions,
but they are not for competence.
Non-state education institutions also want money at the end of the day.
In my earlier submission, I told you that times are changing and things are changing. So if we go competence, for every director of a school who is listening to me knows that he or she has already aligned to that. And to back up this point is to tell you that in international schools, that one was delivered long time ago, because the delivery of the Cambridge education system is hands-on, competence-based, and the numbers in those classrooms are not crowds. So for me, the advice to give to any private school proprietor who is listening to us is in fact to open more schools to register and have more learners that can be given the services that they deserve. So it's not in bad light. It is a good thing that will not keep us out of the business, but will help us. The only challenge that we are getting is on the pay for teachers of sciences that are becoming unmanageable and hard to get. But of course, the conversations over that are ongoing. It is not.
What do you mean unmanageable?
If somebody comes to your school and says, I want you to pay me the money that you cannot afford, then you cannot manage. You have to go into negotiation. You might walk out of your school, but you cannot keep quiet. You have to see how you fit into that human resource and make sure that learners are in class learning.
So I can imagine the new curriculum would require the school to invest more into the things that children need to use to learn. For example, if they're doing projects, if it is baking, then you're into flour and all this kind of stuff. And if you have a bigger classes, then either some, I've been to a school where they say that it is a brick project and they're making bricks. But literally you find about 4 boys who are actually doing this. But at the end of the day of marking, everybody says that is their project. And I saw that somewhere in a school.
The beauty of this is that all private school proprietors, beginning this year, and it started last year, will be meeting the Honorable Minister of Education and Sports to present these issues of importance, of pedagogy, issues of delivery, issues of harmonization of teaching and learning in schools, because largely government will procure textbooks, gives government schools, and does not give private schools. They may have money for project work, and they do not give private schools, not knowing that learners are not private, are public. So for the discussion to be deepened is to have a conversation with the authority, and the authority has given an opportunity that the dialogue and discussion is a given, and we are so excited and happy that before this year ends, Mr. Kamara, you will be briefed that indeed all the providers across the country that are listening to me have met the minister and have delivered what is at stake and what is critical, and who knows, we might have a provision for attending to those project aspects of the curriculum, because we know, we are told, we hear, we read that the Uganda Development Bank has money that is not serving us, that is not adding value to us. If Dr. Patricia Ijangole is listening, is asked to say that the money she has should serve us in the education sector, because all professions, be it doctors, agriculture, engineers, name them, they all go through the hands of teachers. And once you sort that, by having a fund provided to offer that gap to ensure that the curriculum is delivered with the competence that it deserves, then the equation will have been sorted and completed.
Mr. Patrick Kawoyo, hold on to your point, because you're going to take a break. When we come back, my producer this evening, Mr. James Mawadri, will open the line so that you who is listening, you can call and tell us what you think about these propositions of government, but also the continuing implementation of this new curriculum, competence-based curriculum in secondary schools. We'll be right back. Welcome back to 933 KFM, and this is the Hot Seat. My name is Patrick Kamara. My guest tonight is the Secretary of the Federation of Non-State Education Institutions and Executive Director, Education Advocacy Network, Mr. Patrick Kawoyo, and we're looking into the planned, the proposals of government that they plan to scrap or cut off points in secondary school admissions, so that even the one who has scored second division or third division can also go in the topmost schools as we know them in Uganda. They just want to bring some kind of fairness and equality across in the education sector. Let me hear from what you have to say for those of you who have been listening and probably are able to call. So let me take a call online. Hello. Hello?
Yes, Mr. Patrick.
Yes, good evening, sir.
Good evening, and thanks for the show.
You're welcome.
Hey, and our guest is welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You're talking to a Kode.
All right, Mr. Kode, go right ahead, sir.
Hey, two concerns. One,
Yes.
every year, we have been on social, on papers, on everywhere. And you see some districts which can't even produce a single candidate in first division. They are either in 3, second grade, or 4th grade. I don't know whether this is Mr. Patrick, the guest, either they bother him, who are thinking only getting a new curriculum. I don't know. They are targeting those who get 4 and 3 divisions to fit in the new curriculum. Then finally, we have international schools.
Yes.
Even from lower levels to from primary. Do they think, what do they copy from these international schools? Because at the end of the day, these children are going to the national exam. Are there some things they copy which they train these other schools from international schools, which are the value to their lives? Thanks for that, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Kode there. Let me, so you could call again. I was been trying to get somebody. All right, maybe Patrick, if you would you want to respond to Mr. Kode
Kamara. Thank you, Mr. Michael Ekode, for what you have shared. And I will start from your last. Government is supposed to do benchmarking or to do lesson picking or visit a country of their choice to see how it works there. But of course, as Mr. Kode says, the international schools here that can be benchmarked from, and this is a given. So he makes a very good proposal that government is listening, should benchmark, but also to share that those international schools do less of examination, as in beginning of term, beginning of month, end of term, end of this. They do more of competence delivery, and I think this can also be replicated. And Michael asks whether it bothers me that there are districts that do not post first grade or second grade. Earlier on I said, Mr. Kode, that the primary function of education is decentralized. So now Mr. Kode is trying to ask whether the district education officers and CAOs in those districts should wait for the government at the center to tell them what to do. I think on a periodic assessment and improvement plan, every local government should have an improvement plan that should lift those learners from that grade to a desired one as they wait for the office of the Prime Minister, which reviews all local governments' performance in terms of services where education is part.
Okay, let me also pick some more callers. I have another caller online. Hello. Okay, looks like we don't have that. You know, there is like an example.
Hello?
Yes, hello. What's your name and where are you calling from? Could you say that again? Your voice was not very clear.
I'm calling from Kawempe North.
Okay, Kigongo, yes, but still, I don't know whether you have put on your radio and sending an echo.
Okay, let me. Are you hearing me now?
Yes, now better.
Okay. I want to contribute to what the host say is, the guest is saying about matters of the heart.
Matters of the heart, yes.
Yes, and this is it. Behavior is one of them. Okay?
Yes.
Then attitude is the next one. Then skills is another one. Then values, as you say, values, yes. Whether you are religious, God-fearing, or ethical is one of them. So those attitudes, those values are the matters of the heart. And I agree with Patrick Kaboyo
that we need to inculcate that in our children. Why? Because if you have a first-class degree or a diploma, as long as you don't have discipline, the boss will dismiss you and will never put you back to the country and you lose. So I beg to move. That is very good. Then number 2, let us not rush the program. Yes, we agree we need the best competence-based education, but let us not rush it to the. Why? We need all those cream de la cream, people who can do theories and professors and so on. But we need them, but let the system take them on slowly, one at a time. Buy and buy.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I understand there are quite a number of you who would want to participate in this. Let me also take another. I'll take only two more. Hello.
Thank you, Kamara Chiza Besije from Kasangati.
Kiza Besije in Kasangati.
Yes.
Go right ahead,
so
sir.
I wanted to inquire from the you are talking about the education system and the competence-based approach.
Yes.
But I still have issue to say, do these people monitor and inspect these private schools, or they only emphasize on government schools? Because there are scenarios that I know some schools around Kampala that are targeting excellent performance. You find a P5 child waking up at 4 a.m. to go and do an exam on a public holiday. The child is in class up to 6 p.m. They are being beaten, and some actually bleed, but the kids are told not to report any matter because no parent is allowed to come in except on VD, and issues are handled in there, and there is a lot of anxiety that is happening in these private schools, and no person from the Ministry of Education has picked up such a kind of practices in private schools of beating up children and all those cases.
Okay.
So I'm requesting that he should also pick it up, especially in the Kampala schools. It is unbecoming.
All right, thank you very much. Our caller there from Kasangati called the BSJ. Patrick, we only have 2 minutes, exactly.
Thank
2 minutes to conclude
Mr.
this.
Kamara. I have liked Mr. Besij's submission, and I'm interested in him. If the producer can give us his contact, we need to have a conversation. That also to share that corporal punishment was banned. It is illegal. And this, we are going to get interested as leaders in the non-state education provision and treat this as a serious matter and attend to it to its logical conclusion. Council Kawoya from Chigongo, thank you so much for the proposal. You agree with me, and you have also shared with us what you have given in terms of value, skills, attitude, and behavior. As of course I said, behavior is largely at home, and this is where we have the nurture and the nature aspect, that once this learner comes from home where he or she is nurtured, the nature that shapes this child at the school is a second nature. But the first nature is at the nurture level. And again, to say that learners or individuals are different. Patrick Amara cannot be the same as the producer Mawadri. You might find that Mawadri is good at mathematics, and Patrick might not.
Which is also true, by the way.
Which is also true. So we cannot restrict things to be the same. There has to be a difference, and this is as we are born. We are not of the same height, we are not of the same size, but we are different, and these differences are also common among twins, much as they are identical. So with that, I want to thank you and pledge that we shall react to all these issues, but the policies should be disseminated and the public should be brought to the fore to understand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Patrick Kawoyo, I want to thank you so much for your submission. I want to thank you so much for the time, for having also honored our invitation. And for those of you who have been listening, I want to thank you for the privilege of your company. And those who have called in, I want to thank you for that extra effort. And that brings us to the end of tonight's edition of the Hot Seat. Join us again tomorrow, same time, same station. Good night, and God bless Uganda.